Morning, sir.
All right,
Let's go. Let's do this.
Let's go.
We should start and finish on a highlight. We already had applause, Rom.
Exactly, yes.
That's great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session. Pleasure to see all of you here in the room. Hope you're having a great Discover, enjoying yourself, learning some new things. This session, Transforming HPE with AI and Automation, is not a conversation about technology, about theory. This is a conversation about our journey at HPE and what we've been doing around AI and automation, as well as some of the things we do to support you as our customers. My name is Mark Bakker. I am the Executive Vice President and General Manager for Operations, member of the leadership team. And in my role, I run operations for the company, which starts at the beginning of the journey with customers around configuration, quoting and pricing, order management and things like that, running the global supply chain, as well as service and support, the installation and deployment of solutions, as well as technical support. With me is Rom. Rom, why don't you?
Yeah. So Rom Kosla, I'm the CIO for HPE. Been with the company for over a couple of years now. But I always wanted to remind people that at one point I was a customer, and I sat on the other side here. I have about 25 years of CPG and retail experience, and so have a really good understanding and passion for what technology can do to unlock value.
Very good. And we're just going to have a conversation in front of you and see if we can trigger some thoughts and ideas based on our journey. And the way we think about it, or I think about it, and especially those of you in the audience who are part of an enterprise, we, HPE, even though we sell quite a bit of solutions and services in the AI space, in the end, we are an enterprise ourselves.
Right.
And we have all sorts of capabilities and processes and things we do for you, our customers, that have applicable use cases in the AI era and that we are working on. And in some cases, what we like to do is consider this concept of drink our own champagne. What we sell to you, where we try to help you, would be helpful if we have that in place for ourselves so that we know that it actually works and we take advantage of that as well. But we all know that doing deployment of AI and automation is not without any challenges. There's a lot of opportunity in different ways, and at the same time, there is a lot of growth. There's a lot of work going on in large language models, but there's also challenges around performance. There's challenges around ethical use of AI. There's challenges around cybersecurity, which we'll dive into a little bit more as well. And then investment required to make this happen. And where there's investment, there's a financial community, typically a CFO, that says, I would like to see a return on investment. And how do we go about that return on investment? So some of those things we'll talk about a little bit more. So let's dive right into it. And why don't we start, Rom, talk a little bit based on your experience as well, where you see successful implementation across industries.
Yeah, so one of the things that we look at, and we obviously have a lot of capabilities that we can share, but I want to first just kind of highlight some of the things we're seeing with customers on AI usage. So really the aspects that we start to look at, like in finance, some of the capabilities around really fraud detection. You as customers also know that we ought to make sure that we are ultimately responsible for what's happening. So in the finance field, they use AI to really manage and understand the vast data sets that they have. They look at patterns to determine is there potential fraud. They look at keystrokes, things that have a lot of data elements, locations that they could pinpoint potential fraud. Investment insights, those are interesting because they use natural language processing really to pick up things like earnings report, and how do we process that as quickly as possible, or how that gets processed quickly to make the types of investment decisions. I talked about retail. I was part of the retail company for global retail, Fortune 100, and really personalization is such an important topic because as customers go to the stores, how do they decide which products to go? Suggested products are very important, especially if they shop online. The other aspect about products being on the shelf, how do you actually take some of those products, put it on e-commerce? And doing it in the old ways was really a lot of manual effort, trying to type it in, making sure that the quality of the data is correct. Now you can actually start to pull that information as fast as possible and correct it as needed. And then price optimization, really, the price elasticities, one of those aspects around how do we get the right pricing. So, retail is one of those areas, telecom, another one where AI virtual assistants, I think I've done this with calls with my cell phone where I don't even know if I'm talking to the person or I'm talking to an AI agent. Performance tuning, whether or not, the traffic of the data moves for the right, right services to make sure that the high quality performance is actually happening at the network level. And then support capabilities. I've seen this where you have locations that require expertise and you need augmented reality. And you think about some of that capability where the expertise can still support really edge use cases. And then, federal and energy, there's a lot of things around data, specifically in federal, when you think about how much data needs to be processed, a lot of rules and regulations that change, and how much of that information get processed correctly, accurately, and at speed. And then energy, obviously, with the knowledge and the solutions and similar customer service requirements. When you bring all this together, a lot of it's about data processing and then making use of that data and ultimately, taking that data into the next level. So really a lot of interesting things that we're seeing in AI and industries. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in HPE, but obviously a lot of fascinating things. I don't know, Mark, if you see anything here that interests you as well.
Yeah, well, part of, the job I have is running the global supply chain. And obviously, we work with suppliers and manufacturing partners, logistics service providers, and you see in each of those, different types of use cases where, and the support side, the service side, agentic AI, but also more and more, things like self-driving vehicles, visual inspection on, automation lines, production lines, things like that are starting to really get implemented. Obviously, there has been, when you think about automotive manufacturing where you have automated production lines and robotics, that are being used. So, many use cases there as well, right? And so we've been working together across HPE for a while on trying to, have our own set of use cases and implement. And we have a little bit of a process in place. So why don't you talk a little bit about how to govern the process and managing the resources, around implementation and so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard when I first joined the company, someone made a comment about governance is, for AI governance, it's the brakes for a really high-performing race car. And you do want to have a little bit of braking. I'm not sure if you actually just want to push the brakes the whole time, but you do know that this is a high, powerful capability, and you want to be able to pump the brakes every so often just to make sure you have control of the vehicle. And so in that sense, an operating model is such an important topic. So how do we, as a collective organization, have the right strategic oversight? We want to make sure that, one, it's governed ethically, right? We're doing the right things around how we're thinking about AI, how we're leveraging AI. How are we thinking about privacy and data? How are we thinking about how it's going to scale and integrate? And ultimately, what we want to do is centralize a bit of this function just to make sure that we're making the decision as a collective enterprise view. And so from an operating model, we do have the functions across, ethics. We have cybersecurity, you have IT, you have HR, you have finance, sales, we have operations, all involved in the strategy of how we think about it. On the risk assessment side, we do look at what the risks are and how do we actually address the risk, from a human perspective, from a systems perspective, from a cyber perspective. We do experimentation. Part of the great thing about what we do as HPE is we allow and celebrate experimentation. And that experimentation happens in a safe environment. But also at the same time, we adopt and adjust our policies based on our learnings. And we make sure that policies has weight in how we actually think about the effectiveness of that policy being used and governed. And then really the piece that I think is interesting is the intake process. And the intake process is, okay, now we have this governance, now we have the management of risk. What type of use cases are coming through? And we have a standardized intake. We have a form. You fill it in. You identify the business use case. We route the risk based on if it's low risk, we have a green channel approach. Go deliver what you need to. Some of these are higher investments, require much more scaled thinking. Those will require an ROI, and usually a business unit will have to sign off on it and be a sponsor of it. And then we have to monitor this, because ultimately technology changes, the use case may change. So the big part of this is to make sure that this is a virtuous cycle. We got to continue to drive this capability. So I think one of the things that I'm curious about, Mark, is you think about this process. Mm-hmm. How do you think about your function when you think about adopting this?
Yeah. Well, as I outlined to you and the audience, running the operations for an enterprise is pretty large in scale. There's about 20,000 employees part of the organization, and a lot of processing of different activities, etc. And so in an environment like that, you find, that there's more use cases than we have resources to implement. Resources from a financial perspective, but also resources, capable, skilled resources that actually can help you do these things. So it's a matter of looking at, the right set of opportunities and prioritize those. And we look at it, we have this concept of across the customer life cycle and the value chain, where we manage the experience for our customers. We have these moments that matter, where we really believe that we can make a difference, and we tend to think that those are the higher priority items, especially for the bigger ones you talked about, and then obviously what we then focus on, apart from prioritizing, is all about how do we make sure that we can actually do adoption of what we implemented, because the adoption is the key to actually seeing the value show up, whether that is the value in terms of efficiencies, but also the value in terms of improvements from a customer experience point of view, and improvements as well from an employee experience point of view, because in the end those matter too, right? Those are all elements that matter and moments that matter. And so I think one of the interesting things for us to share with the audience as well, now that we talked about the governance process and how we go about these things, what does our environment look like at HPE? What kind of tools do we use?
Maybe just as a context, just for everyone, I'm sure we all have kind of an experience on the technology that's out there and the evolution of it, but we still have business intelligence and machine learning, and that really kind of captures existing data sets and captures current, certain events that really pull some data and bring insights to it. We got traditional AI, which that includes computer vision, that includes natural language processing. A lot of that capability is in the things that we've been developing overall. Generative AI is obviously what everyone's excited about, where you get novel ideas, images, text, based on a set of data that it really, the artifacts that it pulls through and really generates this new set of data. And then the agentic AI is where decisions are now being made and actions are being taken. Those are really interesting. Bring this all together. It's a powerful transformation and change. From an HPE side, we think about the solutions. So I'll first start off with the topic called Chat HPE, which was our kind of vision of how do we take AI usage within our company in a safe way so that none of our data that gets prompted, one, it gets governed correctly on those policies I talked about, but also that data doesn't get exfiltrated. It actually sits within our tenant, and all of that gets managed. And that's been deployed to about 70,000 users. We have agentic AI solutions that we're building on top of that, plus any of the capabilities and solutions that we have. We have third-party tools that we have to integrate together. The one thing, the last part I really think is interesting is the PCAI, the Private Cloud AI solution, which is our AI in a box, which we'll call, it's in our colo. And when users interact with it, there's a couple use cases. One is they can download or they can upload PDF documents like legal contracts that they wouldn't feel comfortable doing in a normal Chat HPE. They could push it into our PCAI server, and then they can train and they can provide inference on that. Also, the last thing that we do is we really put use cases where a function can actually say, hey, we have a really interesting use case we want to use, and we want to use PCAI, and therefore we point it to a specific secure source, and we know that all that data sits within our colo. So a lot of interesting stuff just from our solution set. Any technologies here or concepts here, Mark, that you're interested in?
Yeah, I think, well, you talked about PCAI. If you have not had an opportunity to see the PCAI solution or talk to some of our sales staff, on the floor, I would recommend, like you said, it's AI in a box.
Yeah.
Pretty easy, straightforward, to implement and start playing around with some of those concepts. That's one clearly that is really exciting for us, from a sales perspective, but also using it in our own environment, which leads me to one of the things we in operations really are trying to do is to emulate and replicate all the solutions that we HPE actually have available, so that for our sales force, as they engage with you as our customers as well, they have a reference they can fall back to and say, hey, look, we're doing it this way. So that's really exciting. And then obviously, like I said, we run a large operation. There's quite a few people there. The agentic capabilities, agentic AI is really exciting because that can help in so many ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in some examples of what we're doing there. So those are the interesting things. So let's talk a little bit about the scale of what we're doing. So what kind of requests, projects, etc., are we working on across HPE? Maybe you can shed some light on the numbers here and what kind of things we're doing.
And so we're seeing a lot of, hopefully you're seeing as well within your function. We have about 750 use cases that that we're reviewing, and it constantly grows. 300 of those are committed, meaning we found value and we're going to go ahead and start to work through it. And then we've done a lot of experimentation on some of these other ones. And again, what's important about some of these capabilities are we are working towards not just saying this is just a IT portion. No, it's actually there's a sales capability. There's a code capability around software development lifecycle. There's chatbots that we're building. There's knowledge management that we're driving. Out of these capabilities, though, I would say, Mark, about 100 of them are actually in production right now. And so, we've been at this, and we're seeing again a lot of demand, a lot of capabilities. But really, the big piece that's really important for us, from an IT perspective, is ROI. Yeah. We got to get our investment correctly.
Yeah, and I think you talk about the number that is there, and actually what we're seeing is there's 100 in production. Yeah. We're actually accelerating the pace.
Yes, right, exactly.
of deployments as we're learning more and more. But still, as I mentioned a moment ago, is we have way more ideas.
Yeah, way more demand.
than things we can actually absorb, right? And so it continues to be a question of prioritizing. And look at the return on investment, in the high impact products mostly.
And so I guess that's in your space, what's driving value?
Well, what's driving value, for us is again, it's going back to how does the implementation of these use cases, how does it help us on the three factors? Right. One is how do we improve the customer experience we provide across that entire value chain? Number two is how do we actually improve the employee experience, that is involved in doing these things. And in a lot of ways, there's a lot of complexity in processes. There's a lot of variability in things, and sometimes that is hard for employees to deal with, to work with, etc. So the more we can actually make their life easier to provide a better service to a customer, obviously that is driving value. And last but not least, we should not fool ourselves. In the end, it allows us to look for efficiency gains, and do more with less, because more is automated and simplified, streamlined, etc. All right. And so for those of you, who also I'd like to put a plug in. I mentioned PCAI. If you haven't seen it on the show floor yet, make sure you spend some time there. There's another one, a demo 213, which talks about jump starting to AI services to see some other real world use cases on how organizations work. Apart from the things we do inside of our own shop, we obviously have a large professional services organization as well that is involved in helping organizations deploy these things. You saw the keynote yesterday. There was a video on the Ryder Cup and the work we did there for the Ryder Cup is largely done by the professional services organization from HPE, which is another interesting use case in creating this mini campus, temporary mini campus there.
So, okay, so I look at this picture, Mark, and I'm thinking, okay, how does this landscape and AI automation work? How does this all fit in for your, within your organization?
Yeah, well, you mentioned, there is, 300, active ideas, and 100 have been implemented. Well, 80 of those actually are part of the operations landscape. So we...
You're one of our biggest customers.
Yeah, yes, that's right, that's right. Look, we look at it across the entire landscape, again, the value chain, that we cover, as we have a lot of these customer touch points and moments that matter. And there's some, ideas here in terms of what we're doing this in customer insights, lead generation. We're playing around with computer vision, summarization of bill of materials. We do computer vision, leveraging AI to inspect, boards in our manufacturing process for any contamination or damages or actually counterfeit parts, to be found on there. We're looking at parts planning optimization, and then, we'll talk in a moment as well in the support side of the house, troubleshooting, knowledge management. Those are, very interesting use cases, that we looked at. And again, the important piece here continues to be every time it's the three vectors. How does it improve our experience from an employee and a customer point of view, and how do we become more efficient in everything we do?
So you mentioned some of the services. Like, walk me through some of the use cases, and how do you identify and implement that solution? Yeah,
the one I mentioned on the support side. I think the support is one of the biggest use case for many companies, I would say, those that have support organization. And there is, I think, a universal truth that as a customer, even a customer myself, you mentioned, you call your cell phone provider, and you try to do as much self-service as you can. And so the idea here is to look at different personas that actually can leverage the same level of automation or AI deployment, and the customer wants it, because they want to do self-serve as much as possible. I don't want to talk to an agent. I want to troubleshoot myself. I want to find the information. I want to find it quick. I want to find the status of my order, or I want the status of my replacement part, and I don't want, to spend too much time waiting for other people to do that for me. At the same time, the support agent, in case they get in touch with the customer, they want to quickly understand what is the issue from the customer, and what action can I take. And then I actually want to reduce repetitive debugging task, meaning accessing in a quick and easy way, leveraging AI in your knowledge base, in your technical troubleshooting tips, etc. Leveraging all those capabilities to quickly find the answer to standard problems, etc. And then the supervisor involved in this says, well, listen, I want to leverage this so I can scale without having to hire an additional 100, 200 people. I want this done through automation, and I want to manage the cost and the average time to resolution, because the quicker, the customer can solve the problem themselves, and the quicker an agent can actually find the information, the faster, the problem gets solved, and we can move on to the next one.
And I think one thing we talked about was the deterministic behavior that we want, right? Because I think it's not just we want to make sure it provides an answer, but we want a consistent answer each time. So.
Yeah, and that highlights obviously the importance of things like knowledge management.
Right.
And you mentioned it earlier, right? Data is super important in all of this.
So there's lots of numbers here, but how do successful projects, impact your team members, customers, and partners?
Yeah, well, some numbers here, right? By what we've done so far and implemented, we're seeing that we have improvements with 65% of automated order processing, It started at 0 at some point in time where it's all manual. Now it's 65% is touchless, and no hands on keyboards at all. We have improved our engineering test cycles on products by 50%. Wow. We create 40% more selling time for sales, and actually there's about $9 million of cost savings through this computer vision, with finding faulty boards, etc., taking them out of the production line, and quickly moving on to the next one.
So with all this, obvious capabilities, I'm assuming that there's more time for employees to really focus on core areas.
Yeah, no, that's right. So the thing that it allows to do is that employees can spend less time searching, looking up stuff, etc. Right. They have it easier, in terms of finding that information, putting that in the hands of their customers, and solving their problems. Issues get resolved faster. Right. In some cases, one of the things we leverage as well is we have an extensive partner network. Right. That keeps changing. We onboard partners into our network. We can do that much quicker, 90% faster than we've done it before. It used to take us about 10 days. Now we can do it in 2 days, which is also good for the partner community because that allows them to work with us much faster. And so that's all nice. Yeah. And we talked, about, some of the governance. We talked some of the use cases, some of the ideas we have here. But at the start of the conversation, we also highlighted, listen, there's more than enough challenges, right, on how to make this work. It's not an easy road, to go through, as it shows on the slide.
Which goes back to the race car, right?
That's right.
And so these are actually, the brakes are to help manage the potholes. I think that might be out here. I would say one of the things that we see, and I'm sure every company sees, and they look through this kind of roadmap that you go in and say, look, I want to deploy and implement AI at speed, at scale. Well, first off, you got to really think about cybersecurity threats. Anything you're doing, with data as you start to expose that and drive that for decision making potentially, you got to make sure it's secure. You got to make sure that you're patched. You got to make sure that you're thoughtful about where that data resides. Regulatory pressure. It's a minefield right now where potential changes in regulatory rules and what you build today may not be compliant tomorrow. So you got to constantly think about how that's working and whether or not you can apply those changes as it happens. Data silos and poor quality. One of the things that I always think about is, as a CIO, is if you build things on top of things that are like fragmented, you're going to get hallucinations. You're going to constantly get potentially the wrong data, and go back to that deterministic capability. It may be a different answer each time. So you really got to be thoughtful about how common is that data, and how do you make sure that data isn't duplicative in multiple locations, and make sure that quality is correct. Scale and complexity, and ultimately the amount of processing power you're going to need, and the amount of energy that's going to be used if you put it in your own data center. How much of that has been forecasted? Ultimately you want to go big, but then you may be constrained by power usage. Weak governance goes back to, hey, if you're starting to scale and you're not keeping an eye on all these changes and all these rules and all this governance on privacy data, you may catch yourself in a situation where you may have to scale back. And then really the one I talked about this, Mark, at some point around cultural resistance. It's not just a team, it's really also leadership. You really do need to think about how does a top leadership actually enable cultural awareness and also embodiment of change.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting topic. Yeah. In many ways, when at least our experience as well, it's another change project in a large corporation, and oftentimes, people will refer to management of change, change resistance, and obviously, when you implement some of these things for the user community, if you want, there might be some concerns. This is going to take over my job. My life is going to change. I'm not sure I like it, which is all true, and that's all part of the adoption and change management that needs to happen. But I think you and I both have the experience that the change management and the resistance to some of this actually can be all the way at the top of a corporation. And particularly when you think about it from a financial point of view, I think yesterday in the keynote there was reference as well to this MIT study that talks about 80% of AI deployments have failed.
Right.
And I think what they're saying is, well, they failed because they didn't deliver on cost savings, headcount reductions, and things like that, or at least not fast enough.
Right.
And I think that's the cultural resistance that could be there as well, where there is this desire for this thing to solve all the problems within the flick of a finger, and the savings to show up within 6 months, whereas we're at the early days of this thing, right? It's going to take time for this to settle, and for it to really work, we still need to leverage the available resources, employees we have, human in the loop, those kinds of things, like really important there.
There was an article one of my teams shared with me from CIO magazine, and it said within IT itself that there was a significant amount of IT team members that actually might be, and they use the word sabotage, but they're not necessarily embodying the change of AI. And actually it was an interesting article to read because within IT and within technology, you think you're enabling it, but you also have teams that are fearful of the change and fearful what this may mean.
Right. Yeah, and it's not on the slide here, but maybe a curveball. You and I had conversation on this a while back, but how important do you think in this context is things like process standardization?
Oh yeah.
Process simplification.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, and I see this in multiple industries as well, is just I think people get excited about, hey, let's just put AI on top of a process we don't fix, and what actually happens is you have exactly that, an inefficient process, you automate an inefficient process, but it's still inefficient. There is that change of how do we really standardize? How do we get to a better degree versus now, and then you AI, then you will process enable that capability. And then scale it, for value. And I think that's something that that requires a significant change in investment before you even sometimes start writing code.
Right.
Okay, so how do we avoid? I mean, you think we just talked a little bit. How do we avoid some of these risks, and what are the unlocks for AI to be successful?
Yeah, there's a number of things here, and I mean, you and I talked about this yesterday, right? In the end, the primary element here and the key to unlock AI success is to make sure that cybersecurity
we got to protect
does not
our data.
become the problem here, right? So it's right bang in the middle of the slide there on the key. I think we both agree, including our CISO,
who's going to watch this video.
Yes, that this is a critical element of everything you do.
Yeah.
Again, you mentioned a moment ago, data due diligence is key. I always like to add, to that, it's slightly different data, and then there's knowledge management.
Right.
In some of these use cases, having the right data, but also knowledge management available, and that knowledge management gets refreshed and updated, etc. Otherwise, this becomes an issue. Be flexible and dare to experiment. Not everything is going to work. Not everything is going to deliver the desired outcomes right from the start. Even though the CFO wants it all to deliver value immediately. Right. And I think what we're learning as well is that you want to include the workforce. Right. You want to include the workforce in your journey, and you want actually the ideas to come from your teams, and that can help you clearly define, what can help their experience get improved, but also how that can help the customer experience get improved. There's obviously, when you do this, the idea of continuous improvement. And then you mentioned it, before, ethics, really, really important. Maybe you can spend a few words on ethics and the importance of that, and how we think about that.
Yeah, I think what we always want to do is we want to ground ourselves, obviously, in everything we're doing as, one, can we sleep at night? It has the piece that's there. We definitely have ethical rules that we manage, and it is part of our policy. We want to make sure that the data that we're using, we're constantly reevaluating to make sure that is that data being used for the right purpose. And therefore, one of the things that we want to do, and we actually do use cases where we point data to specific areas. And we're like, hey, look, that data might be PII. We don't want that. We don't want to point that data, or we don't even want to leverage that data for this particular use case. And so, we really got to think through a lot of these things, and that's why it goes back to that governance process. Experiment, but also have a thoughtful process on the guardrails that you're using to make sure that you are managing accordingly. And then, once you understand it, you can go as fast as you can. But yeah, pump the brakes every so often just to double check you're going the right speed. So.
Good. Well, thank you. We shared a little bit with you on our journey at HPE, what we do. And as I said in the beginning, we also offer a fair amount of services that can help you. And as part of in particular, our professional services organization, we are quite well set up to support you in the different areas. And when you look on the slide here, and from a day -1, day 0, there are services that can help you in advising, consulting, and designing and planning for your needs, the implementation, integration, and running and optimizing. There is on the show floor, I mentioned 1.2.13 demo. There is a number of other opportunities for you to see how we've helped other customers as well. And actually, the resources that can help you do that are also the resources that help us deploy some of these things inside. And so if that is of interest, obviously, we are more than happy to engage with many of you and support you on your journey. And so we hope that this has been a interesting enough conversation for you and has given you some food for thought. And we have a couple of minutes left, so if there's any questions in the room, we're more than happy to answer those.
Please ask Mark.
No, the CIO. Any questions?
All right.
No, it has all been very clear. That's good. All right, well, in that case, thank you very much for your attention, and wishing you a good rest of your day. If you wouldn't mind scanning the code, so this is where you can see all the demos on the floor, if there is any of them of your interest. And last but not least, your feedback matters to us as well, so we can make sure that we tailor any of our sessions to your future needs. So please take a moment and provide us with your feedback. And with that, thank you very much for attending, everyone, and wishing you a good rest of your day.